Hello, hope everybody is well. This week we're going to be talking about connectedness to nature and green and blue spaces and well-being. So I thought it was interesting because last semester I did lots of research about green versus blue spaces and kind of like what the differing levels were for well-being. So what green spaces are is just like areas that have a lot of green. So it's typically like forests, a lot of like grasslands, mountains, anywhere that you can think of that has green in it. And then blue spaces are kind of defined as like bodies of water. So the ocean or lakes, rivers, those kind of things. And the research that I was looking at was done a couple of different ways. Most of the research was looking at urban populations and how people that lived in more lush green areas versus people that live in suburban areas with not much green versus people that live like by the coast or by a lake, and what their well-being and mental health looked like. I thought it was pretty interesting because like if you go back in time and like still today, the Japanese culture places such a high emphasis on getting out in nature and particularly like in forests, and it's actually prescribed to them still. If you go to like a doctor there or like a mental health professional and you're saying like you're feeling depressed or you're having low moods or anxiety or feeling stressed, a lot of them will recommend you to go to forests and sit there and either sit or walk, but to like soak in the atmosphere. And that this practice like of forest bathing is actually like really healing. There's been studies to like assess how this actually benefits people. So like there's studies showing adrenaline and cortisol dropping from people that spend more time in these like forest areas that are suggested. So it does have like a huge impact, and it is really helpful for people struggling. And I think it's just interesting to see that like we've inherently known this from an Eastern traditional world of like getting out there, feeling less stressed. And I feel like a lot of us would just realise that, oh yeah, if you're not feeling great, going out in green spaces or in nature is gonna like help de-stress you. So yeah, I think that was quite interesting.
Is there a difference
What do you mean?
between them?
Between blue and green?
Yeah.
So most of the research is done on green landscapes because it's a little bit easier to control. So there's some studies looking at like neighborhoods and amount of greenery, and to manipulate it, they can like just vary the amount of trees in the neighborhood. So it's been more easy to study more like controlled and reliably green spaces. But with blue spaces, it still shows an improvement. There's just like less research on it, and usually the results are like slightly less significant. But it's hard to say because I feel that there's not enough on blue spaces yet to like say that they're even, but they probably are around even. It's just like there's more research showing green spaces are more beneficial than blue spaces just because the sheer amount of studies or like the way in which it's assessed.
But is there a difference in the results, like what you actually get out of it?
So some of the studies, there's like no difference. Some of the studies, there shows like green is slightly more significant results of like overall positive well-being is improved more significantly with green spaces. But that's not all studies. Some of them show even.
But none of them show blue being more.
None of them that I've seen have shown blue as more.
I feel like the results would correlate with how much time we would have spent in each space, like as we evolved.
Yeah. Like you mean from when we're a child and what it does for us,
or even way back from evolution.
Like in our genetic line.
Yeah.
So like
as a species.
Yeah. But even like getting a little bit more specific, it would be interesting to see like, so where your heritage, where you're from. Do you know where you're from originally? Like
No, not
England
really.
or
Like Scandinavia,
Scandinavia?
I think.
Yeah. Because it would be interesting to see like if there were any links with like heritage and preference too.
Yeah, but I mean, with that being said, I guess the biggest impact would just be how you grew up, like you said.
Yeah, like what your lifestyle looks like.
Yeah, what you've directly experienced.
Yeah. And I think like, well, in the Australian study, coastal towns were pretty much on par with green spaces and well-being.
What do you mean on par? Like blue and green were on par.
Yeah. Yeah. But when it starts to get like comparing countries and different spaces, it's hard to say like the true cause, because it would be like such a different environment. Like in Australia, the lifestyle that you have at the beach represents like more wealth usually. Like a lot of the time it can like correlate to higher socioeconomic status, which doesn't always increase like well-being, but I'm just saying that could be a factor as well. So it's something to like think about when you then compare that with other countries and their coastal spaces versus green spaces. Like there's other factors to think about that like they try and rule out as much as possible, but it's hard to get results that are just showing green space, blue space differences. Like that's a really hard thing to do. The other thing that like seems to really affect well-being is time in nature. So no matter what, it's just like the frequency of nature. So the more time you spend in nature, like the more positive your mental health and well-being is like overall. And that's like very significant in a lot of the literature. But then another step further is like the more time you spend in nature, the more connectedness you feel to nature. And then the more connectedness you feel to nature, also the more positive the benefits as well of well-being and mental health. Like depression.
Are they separate things?
So they're controlled separately, yeah. So you do a survey, for example, saying like how connected you feel to nature. Then you do a survey saying how long do you spend in nature? And then you do a separate thing. Yeah. So those are two separate.
Yeah, but do you think they're separate things?
Yes.
Like they don't affect each other?
No, I think they affect each other for sure.
Yeah.
I think they have a relationship and that's like shown. But it's interesting because like that's what you see, the more you spend in it, the more of a relationship you have with nature.
That's like anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And the stronger your relationship, the more benefits you get. And that's reflected in like decreased depression and like decreased anxiety and stress levels.
Is there like a sweet spot, or like 2 hours a week where you get most of the benefits and, you know?
Yeah. I think it would be hard to say because all the studies are so like variable. Like some of them, like they're controlled quite differently. I'm not sure what the sweet spot would be. It just looks like the more, the better.
Yeah. What do you think it would be empirically?
Well, I think if somebody experiencing nature daily versus somebody experiencing nature weekly would have like a huge effect, and that is shown.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure like the exact amount of time. I feel like it wouldn't have to be, the duration wouldn't have to be very long, but even like 15 minutes or so. So a time where you can like drop into the space.
Yeah.
So maybe 15 minutes or so. But yeah, more frequency over duration, I would say.
Yeah. I've found that exercise within those spaces can like accelerate it. So if you don't have as much time, you can kind of get two things done at once.
Yeah.
And it also like gives you more benefits than just doing them separately as well, I reckon.
Definitely. Definitely. I think as well the impact of like being in more of like a flow state through exercise.
Yeah.
So having your mind clearer, and you would be like more susceptible or like at a space where you can absorb more than your kind of like your default mode network, like just going off and off and off. So your default mode network mold. Your default mode network is basically like the state in which rumination occurs. So thinking about like past situations or what you could have done differently, thinking about like what you have to do. Like it's kind of just like the inner dialogue that is there. When that's switched off, a lot of replenishing things in your body can start to happen. So in exercise, that's why it's also so beneficial. It's because your default mode network starts to like really turn down on the dial. Like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's kind of linked to your retention, like where your retention is. Like it's not so much, it's focused on the present rather than the future or the past.
Yeah. Just like being in the moment and absorbing everything around you.
Yeah. And exercise does that. Because if you're not focused on the present, then you're going to run into a tree or you're going to drown or, you know.
Yeah. You're forced into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And therefore you can like absorb your surroundings.
Yeah. It feels like there's just so many things to do. Like you got to work and you got to make sure you get enough time in the sun and nature and exercise and make sure you eat right and like all of these little things. But it seems like if you just focus on one of them, all of them seem to feed into that. Like not as much doing all these little things as just focusing on maybe doing one or two core things, and the benefits sort of spread out into the rest of your life without even having to focus on them necessarily. Like if you were to spend more time in nature, exercising, you're getting all the benefits of exercise, you're getting all the benefits of being in nature, and that is going to overflow into your life, and you're going to be able to be more present, and you're going to be able to make better decisions. You're going to be less stressed and emotional throughout the rest of your life, and you're going to be more able to grow that because you're more present and you're more aware. And it'll be easier for it to spread. It's not like you have to go into nature and then it's just as hard to exercise with that, and then it's just as hard to make sure you're eating the right things, and it's just as hard to make sure you're not spending too much on social media. Like if you're exercising in nature, you're doing all of those things at once.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like when we're talking about exercising in nature, there are also a lot of studies that show if you're exercising outside, you are more connected to nature too through that. But like it just comes, as you're saying, like those kind of things just start to flow into each other. And I even feel like the food that you crave when you're like working really hard, like you want to replenish your body, you know, and you need more water, you need more nutrients, you need more protein. So all that kind of just like flows into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is true that like if you just focus on like one part of it, it seems like way more simple. So just like exercising in nature is a great way to just kickstart like all those things. And I find that even like creativity too comes from places like that.
Yeah.
Because like that default mode network is kind of turned down, which means your flow and your creative energy can kind of take over. And with that, you know, you feel very alive and very connected to yourself and others.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've said before that what you see reflected back at you in nature, or what you notice, is a direct reflection of who you are. And yeah, it's just like another thing that kind of adds in on top of it. So you're like exercising, you're in nature, you're being creative, you're like doing all of these things at once. And I think that's why it's so cleansing to do, because it's just like there's no room for the quote unquote negative stuff.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting, there was a study done in hospitals where patients had greenery outside their window versus they were looking at a brick wall outside the window, and those who had the greenery healed faster and had better well-being across the board. And I feel like that is just a simple thing to be like, just surround yourself with greenery. Like, if you can put more plants into your house, if you can eat your breakfast while being outside or looking at nature, like just the small little things can help. Like in this room where we have it's our office, it's the studio, it's the podcast recording like space. We spend a lot of time in here. It's my study space. Like we fill it with green just kind of naturally, but also thinking about, okay, this is very calming. It makes you feel good. It's inviting. Like, and I feel like that's why plants are so helpful with that, because it's such a small thing, but they have such a lovely effect. And also to be surrounded by something that's like living and growing too is quite nice.
I'll tell you another thing that can further amplify it is if you're doing it with other people as well. So you're like increasing your bonding, your social connection with people. And I think that can focus the connection to nature. And if you're exercising as well, it can deepen that connection at the same time. So like just, I think thinking about just little things that you can do that'll pay off kind of disproportionately to the amount of effort it takes. Like if you just do a little bit every day, you know, plan to go once a week with someone else.
Yeah. I feel like with other people is like slightly different, because it's like the endorphins that you're releasing through exercise and through like having gratitude for the space that you're in increases like your openness. So I think there would be some other mechanisms there at play for like connection, like endorphins and the hormones that you release when you've achieved something together. It's particularly released when two people have achieved something, and it happens a lot in workspaces. Can't remember what it's called. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it different to the dopamine, oxytocin?
Yeah, it's like a special hormone that is released when you've achieved something together. I can't remember. Yeah, well, dopamine's released when you've achieved something that you want to.
And both of you having that response at the same time would it's just double the dopamine. Yeah.
You kind of like are feeling their excitement, and then you have your own excitement, and it's amplifying it.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Go outside.
I think...
touch some grass.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of the episode. If you can implement this in any way, just staring more at greenery, maybe getting a plant, doing exercise outdoors, anything that incorporates a little bit more of nature.
Do you know if it has to be nature, or do you just paint your walls green?
I don't know.
Someone try that out and comment or DM us. Paint every wall in your house green, and then let us know if you feel any better.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, surely. For science.
For science. That's right.
Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.